My name is Priera Panescu, and I am the lead scientist, plant-based specialist at the Good Food Institute. I've been here for a little bit over 2 years, and essentially my job is just to be a nerd about plant-based ingredients, and I think I do a pretty good job about it. So yes, today I'll first start with a quick introduction, and then we will go through each of the talks, followed by a quick panel discussion. So why did I want to focus on alternative fats today? I tell people this all the time. One of my top 5 concerns about the food industry is coconut oil. And I think when I say that to people, they're kind of like, what? That's pretty niche, right? So let me explain to you why. A couple of years ago, we put out this analysis that looked at, let's assume by 2050, we have about 6% of the meat market. And let's also assume that we just make all of our plant-based meat exactly the way that we do now. That means a lot of coconut oil. It also means a lot of these other ingredients here, but let's focus on coconut oil today. For coconut oil in 2030 to meet 6% of plant-based meat demand, we would need about 0.61 million metric tons of coconut oil to fulfill that. What that ends up coming out to is about 16% of all of coconut oil that will be available in 2030, which is insane, right? We can't have 16% of coconut oil go to just 6% of meat products. There's a huge problem in that. There will be a supply chain bottleneck if we don't look at that a little bit more closely. That comes out to about 19% of all coconuts cultivated. That's where you see that 19% there. So it's a huge chunk of the coconut oil market. This might end up leading to really high costs of coconut oil, making it really, really difficult to get. But then on top of it, if you've ever worked with coconut oil, you know it's not the best animal fat replacer, right? It is solid-ish at room temperature. I moved from LA about 2 years ago, and I can tell you that room temperature in LA, it's definitely liquid a lot of the year. So if you end up putting that in a plant-based burger, how good is it really at mimicking those animal fats? I'm really talking about a burger where we kind of see the chunks of fat, that adipose tissue, but there's all types of animal fats that we want to mimic, right, in the plant food industry or cultivated or fermentation-derived industry. So not only is coconut oil not even that great to mimic adipose tissue, but there's going to be a lot of limitations as far as mimicking milk globules and other types of animal fats. So I think we can do a lot better from a technical perspective, and we can definitely do a lot better from a supply chain perspective and from a humanitarian perspective, right? Coconut oil, palm oil, these tropical oils, they're not very sustainable and they're not very humanely harvested. So with that, I would love to turn it over to the speakers. You guys don't need to hear from me anymore. Let's first start with Savor. So today we have Chiara Cecchini, and Chiara leads business development at Savor, a company on a mission to make sustainable, craveable, animal-free fats by producing carbon-neutral fat and oils, starting from carbon dioxide. In her previous role as CEO of Future Food Americas, Chiara worked with major food and beverage companies on designing innovative strategies and solutions for positive planetary impact. She is a self-proclaimed food nerd, and I believe she's in great company today. Come on up, Chiara. Yeah, I also do your clicker. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here to talk about fat and an alternative protein conference. So very excited to see a big crowd here. I want to start by just like level setting on what Pri said before going into like a more sensorial and delicious part of what I really like to talk about. And so yes, fat is 7% of greenhouse gas emissions that we produce as humans every single year. It's about proteins, and still it's a lot about fat as well. And we're talking about animal fat, but also about plant oils. And Pri, I think, like gave a pretty good sense of it. So fat is problematic, and this is probably like the first starting point for this conversation. Having said that, nothing tastes good without its fat. And we know that, like, there is very, very honestly, there are very, very few foods that we all crave and we are all crazy about, that don't have kind of like a crazy amount of fat into it. And it could be a flaky croissant from your favorite pastry chef. It could be French toast cooked with butter. It could be even vegetables that you just put on a pan with some butter. It could be your pancakes on Saturday morning with some Irish or like French butter on top. Whatever it is, we know that there is nothing like animal fats. And specifically, there is nothing like cow butter. And so having said that, we also discovered, just kind of like my day-to-day job, which is great, that chefs really know about that. So this is like a very small sample of chefs at the Savor we keep on talking to. And everybody says kind of like very similar thing. Taste is flavor, flavor is fat. There is like, it's very hard to kind of like get to like a good butter if it doesn't have like the flavor profile, because butter is flavor, butter is versatile, fat is something I can do everything with. There is no chef that doesn't have at least like 2-3 types of different butters in their kitchen. Butter is creaminess. There is something about the sensorial aspect of it that makes fat and butter very special. And so for me, especially for my work, kind of like being on the front line of a company that works on fat, the question is very much every single morning, how do we provide chefs with that unique feeling, like the versatility, the creaminess, the mouthfeel, something that dairy fat has, but it's very, very hard to replicate otherwise. But as we said in the very first slide, and as Pri said, without the suffering, without the depleting, without the killing, and most of the time consumers don't even think about, but we know it's there. And so as insider in the industry, we do have the responsibility to give them what they're looking for without all these benefits. How do we give chefs an ingredient to be proud of? Knowing that, and that's, I think, is very important for everybody at this conference to really think about all the time. No chef in the world would serve bad food in name of the environment. We can think that sustainability is a driver in a lot of consumer purchase behavior and chefs and so on. The reality is nobody will take the responsibility to serve bad food in their own name, in their own company, just because it's good for the environment. And this is how we actually started thinking about butter and Savor butter. I do have butter here as well, if someone want to taste it at some point. But so thinking about this for us has been very much about how do we nail down a product that is the key representation of fat. If you think of fat, 80% of butter is actually fat. Dairy fat is very special. There are some alternatives on the market that try to get there, but it's very hard to get on performance and taste, the feeling that I was talking about. How do we get there? Knowing that what we're looking for is a butter that performs, is a one-to-one replacement. So if you talk to chefs, they all tell you these keywords. I want a butter that browns. I want caramelization. I want lamination. I want puffing. I want spreading on a slice of bread. I want the curd. There are like millions and millions of dollars that are spent every single year from companies that are trying to replicate butter on the curd, because it's something that it's crazy, but like it's something that sells and it's something that people can recognize and are familiar with. And so we started with that because we think that this technological approach does have a pretty key advantage on creating something that otherwise would be very hard to make. At Savor, we don't use cultivation, we don't use precision fermentation. We actually use like a different kind of approach. We base our process on thermochemistry. And so we start from an input, which is basically CO2 and green hydrogen in a form of paraffins. And then we take those paraffin waxes and we basically oxidize them. Oxidation is a word I never tell in front of chefs. Chefs don't like to hear that, but what I can say is that we basically push oxygen in this wax to actually get a reaction. And through that reaction, what we get are fatty acids. Short, medium, long chains of fatty acids, which we know are the building block of any kind of fat. So with that, we can actually craft what we want. And so in our case, we are having fun with trying to craft a fat that very much behaves as beef tallow, in the way it melts down and the way then it crystallizes back. Or pork lard. And you see like how similar and different these are. Like everything is very peculiar. I could double click on the beef tallow and see like how a corn-fed beef actually has a fat profile that behaves very differently from a grass-fed one. So it's very specific. Nature got very, very deep into the details on that. But we do believe that starting from these building blocks is actually something that uniquely we can achieve. And then another example is actually what you see in this butter is milk fat. And so the fat that you find in dairy products and you find in butter as well. And so you see how it melts down in a very unique and specific way and how it gets back in terms of recrystallization. And this is a work in progress, but like all the work is basically that we can do with these building blocks is around mimicking that. And so we decided to really start with this dairy fat and to put it in a perfect vessel for dairy fat, which is butter. So this is not on the market yet. We're going through a regulatory path. So it's something that, again, we have a hack here. We have like a version that is actually made with food grade fatty acids that could be tasted, which is how we are getting feedback from very, very early on. But this we think is something very special because it's animal free, it's dairy free, is nut free, which is something you usually don't find in alternative butters. And since we can get this melting profile and we can get closer and closer, we can actually improve on something that usually vegetable oils don't get to. Botanical oils come with a predefined set of characteristics that are usually very hard to change. And in this case, we're very movable, we're very improvable while fighting something which is very static, which I think is one of our advantage here. And so everything that keeps us up at night and we are kind of like nerding about now when it comes to this butter is how do we get closer to the melting profile when the butter is on the pan, or how do we get closer to the mouthfeel? This is very interesting actually. This is like the difference of solid fat and liquid fat and how it changes in temperature, and that's very interesting because what happens here is like at 37 Celsius, which is our body temperature, there is like the very last change of state of butter, which is the reason why when you put like animal fat and especially butter in your mouth, you actually have you have a feeling and you feel like there is a couple of seconds when like butter stays in your throat, on the back of your throat. And that's not a vegetable oil characteristic, but it's very much what we're going after with that. Or workability, how much strength do we need to actually spread on a slice of bread? So we're getting pretty nerdy on this aspect, which is probably what I want to drive home, I think, with this conversation here. Like we know that in order to win as an alternative fat company, we need to hit price. And this is, I know we'll go there with the panel, but like we believe that we picked this specific technology because there wasn't any other technology that we could believe in that could get us like no green premium, getting there on price. We need that, we need climate, we know that. In order to decarbonize the food system, that 7%, that's 4 gigatons of CO2 needs to be cleared off, and we can do that. And in addition to that, I think it's very important to drive this message home of taste is key. Nobody will ever take a product and buy it again and eat it again if it's not about taste, if it's not about the sensorial aspect. Purchase intent and real purchase are not really matching in food. Food is very emotional. Like people like really choose not with their brain, but they choose here. And it's very important to focus on giving them an experience that talk here and don't talk to the brain. So yeah, sustainable, being craveable is what we're trying to do, and we think we have an advantage of that. And in general, fat has a key role in trying to achieve that. Thank you.
Every single time someone tells me about, every single time someone tells me about a new ingredient, I'm like, can you let me taste it? So I'm very excited about that. So next up we have Yulin Liu. So Let me advance. Nope. Okay, next up, we have Jason Bug. Jason is the Chief Product Officer at Shiru, an ingredient company that leverages machine learning, bioinformatics, and precision fermentation to identify and create functional, sustainable ingredients for the plant-based industry. Before joining Shiru, Jason worked at Ferrero. He actually lived in Belgium and was working on chocolate, so I'm very jealous. And as well as Amorous. So he has a really great technical background. I'm very excited to hear about what Chiara has been up to.
Sure, thank you. It's great to see so many people here ready to talk about fats. I'm always curious. When I think about fats, I kind of feel like it's the overlooked macronutrient, right? And then with Ferrero, sugar, delicious. Clearly delicious, nutrition, uncertain, protein, I don't know, delicious, but certainly nutrition, certain. But fats, it just goes back and forth. Are they good for you? Are they bad for you? It just depends on what day and who you talk to. And but as Chiara mentioned, right, the deliciousness impact of fat, I think, has long been overlooked, and I think it's a really critical aspect for us to solve. The likability of the products that we're trying to deliver to really transform to sustainable performance. And so, that's really an intentional choice that I've made in my career to focus a lot on fats. We've had the great fortune at Shiru to use our platform to be able to exploit proteins to turn fats into delicious fats to transform the industry. So OleoPro is what we'll talk about today. It's a part of Shiru's business. We'll talk a little bit about Shiru and then talk about our OleoPro high performance fat solution. And so, again, moving a little different direction than Chiara as we think about butter, now leaning in more into animal fat and animal fat alternatives. Of course, the sustainability on coconut oil, I like to liken it just to the, it's second to palm oil because we make 100 million tons of it. Everyone has got their eyes on it, right? And coconut oil has a little health halo. A lot of people are willing to look the other way around the sustainability of coconut oil, but it's grown in very challenging areas, and its scalability is also very challenged. So coconut oil, from a sustainability standpoint, is well recognized as a challenge, but the performance of coconut oil, of palm oil, of traditional hard fats in confectionery is exceptional, right? And there was no alternative, in cocoa butter, and these are great. But now, as we think about animal fat replacement, is a whole different request from the product, right? It's no longer triglycerides, right? We're trying to make products that taste delicious and juicy and have fatty mouthfeel. And that's a real gap as we think about trying to put coconut oil into these systems today. And at 10, 20% of the product, it's a disproportionately high impact on taste and likability. And I think this is a critical aspect. So a little bit more on that. Again, when I started building this open innovation function at Ferrero, they said, well, why don't you solve the palm oil challenge? I said, okay, that's a great, and a good objective for Ferrero. They might be interested in it. But replacing triglycerides is a really, really challenging problem. There's a lot of C16 out there from palm, and it's hard to replace it in a cost-effective way. We can try to make hard oils with various ways, but that's a triglyceride function. But in the world of plant-based meat, it's a whole different ask, right? We're talking about animal adipose tissue, not triglycerides. These are oils that are bound within tissue that when you heat them, they stay together even if they're molten, right? This is what adds to that deliciousness. So it's retained through the cooking process. As we chew, you get that mastication and that fatty release, that fatty mouthfeel, all those fat soluble flavors that are bound within there to really deliver the taste performance that we expect. Coconut, liquid oils, and hard fats today, we're having a challenge bringing those in, delivering that same taste performance. One very simple way to look at it is as you cook it and the oil gets released, simply you're losing a lot of that ability to deliver that flavor and that expectation. So what do we do about that at Shiru? So at Shiru, the main focus is about leveraging insights, digital insights to predict protein functionality, to test and validate that functionality. So we use a computational approach to make this in our dry lab function, and then the wet lab, we validate these insights. And so through that process, we have a couple platforms. One of them was around understanding how proteins react to temperature change. And through that, we developed an analytics platform to be able to look at things that bind water, but also things that can bind oil. And so what we found is now through a unique blend of non-GMO, commercially available plant isolates, we were able to manipulate those, to process those in a way that allows them to hold oil very tightly. Well, maybe very tightly isn't exactly it, just tightly enough, right? You want it to hold a little bit, be ready to release those. So that's really the key. That Flourish Insights, our computational and wet lab function identified this range of ingredients and a process by which we can hold liquid oils and turning it into OleoPro. There's an example of the product on the right. That's a 95+% liquid oil with around 5% plant protein, turning that liquid oil into a premium fat, fatty by touch, fatty by mouth, and working in the products. And so this is our high performance fat solution. Again, we're using a range of unsaturated liquid oils, and so you can also take the arguments around saturated fat and unsaturated fat as you want, but from a label standpoint, from a consumer acceptance, generally we're going to move away from saturated fats and into unsaturated fats to get more nutritional, higher score and higher acceptability, and of course moving to broad acre crops that produce oils away from tropical oils allows us to provide a much more sustainable and scalable raw material resource for building these fat solutions. But then finally, and actually first, second, and third, it's then all about performance, right? We're really focused on delivering the performance that the partners and the customers need in order to make the change. And so juicy, fatty mouthfeel is the first, is the second, and is the third focus for us. So what have we done? We've done a lot in ground type products, a lot of work in-house and with partners to look at just really one-to-one replacement. This is not an emulsified product. This is a one-to-one replacement in which you gain a direct swap for coconut oil typically. We've done this at scale. We put this into products in a range of different mixing at 100 kilo scale, made finished product out of it. So it's working from a processability, really a key aspect to not just build something that works in the lab and when you taste it, but that works in a scaled process. So we've run this a few times at multiple facilities and have very robust processability for this. And then from a labeling standpoint, it's really liquid oil and a blend of proteins. The liquid oil is quite flexible. We can turn olive oil into a spreadable or an olive oil fat. We can turn sunflower oil. And so all this, we fast-tracked the patent. It should be have a readout in a month or two, and at that time we'll be a little bit more open with what we can say about the competition. But that's where we are. So now how does it perform? Again, these are some metrics. The first one is maybe not a hard one to get, but I would say it's easy. Okay, the oiling out is a process, mass loss, right? Some of the products we might try do hold oil, right? And the mass loss is lower. But then when you taste them, it's still holding oil and you're not getting that fatty mouthfeel. And so in some of our early iterations, I thought, wow, great. Mass loss reduced. This is going to be a great product. And you tasted it, it was dry, right? So it's the fine balance of holding that oil, but then getting the third-party sensory panel data we get below, which is an increase compared to that on that juiciness, which is I would say one of the most ephemeral and challenging aspects of these products is that juiciness. And so we're holding onto that oil tightly, but not too tightly, and it's allowing the product to really taste well. and as well as a bit from. So where are we in the process? We call this our anhydrous oleopro. So this is a product we're making again with a few percent of this plant proteins, and we're really actively partnering. We're scaling this product with contract manufacturing and an active commercialization in these mince type products. We want to turn to whole cuts as well. I think there's an opportunity for self-standing fats to deliver and exceed the current taste performance there. We also find, very interestingly, these can provide stable emulsions. If we take these proteins that we process, we can make emulsions with these, right? We've tried a few in soft cheese, but it's a secondary aspect for us because the feedback we're getting and the traction we have on the mince products is so strong that we're really focused on this. So this is where we are, and look forward to talking about it more later.
I love the idea of including even more proteins in the fat ingredient. That's amazing. All right. Now we will hear from Yulin Liu. So sorry about that. Yulin is the co-founder and CEO of Yali Bio, a San Francisco startup in precision fermentation that specializes in fats and lipids. The company's long-term vision is to use biotechnology to create climate-smart foods and mitigate the deforestation problems associated with land-based animal farming and tropical oil plantations. Yulin, come on up.
Well, thank you, Pri, and thanks for this room of audience here. I'm Yulin Liu. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Yali Bio. And we're working on animal-free designer fats with precision fermentation. This is our team. I started the company about 2 years ago and with my co-founder, Peng. And over this duration of time, we've recruited biologists, fermentation scientists, and engineers and chemists really to build the core tech around making designer fats possible in the lab. I wanted to talk a little bit about fats. Again, I'm a bioengineer by training, and I've actually been working on fats and lipids for a very long time. Fats are often ignored or kind of not obvious to consumers, but they're so important in biology. They're fundamental in biology. Proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and lipids. They also make foods taste great, as the other panelist has already shared, and change the way our tongues perceive foods. And, as what we can see here, in palm, in sunflower oils, in animals, right? Fats are omnipresent. And that's actually one of the reasons when we thought about how to make fats with a precision fermentation platform, because the fatty acid biosynthesis are highly conserved, so that make it possible to make it in microbes. The scale of production and land impacts are massive too. Here is some data that we've been collected over a decade between 2009 to 2019, where we see almost 50% of increase in terms of vegetable oils that's been produced. And these are massive scales. Palm is in 76 million tons kind of production. And we see that across the board for vegetable oils, as well as significant increase of animal fats. And these are huge stress point for our planet. So we're approaching it differently. We're looking at fundamentally how to change the carbon efficiency of converting starting carbon into the fats and lipids in a lot more efficient way compared to the land-based agriculture. We take these raw materials from renewable carbon feedstock, and through a few days of cultivation in bioreactors, leading to a high cell density fermentation that can accumulate large amount of fats and lipids within these cultures. And our technology can really working on the designing aspect of these fats and lipids, where it changes the saturation, unsaturation, changes the chain length, and changes the positioning of these fats and lipids to better mimic the properties of what we're seeing with animal-derived fats. And I wanted to share a bit more about our scientific process, which I think is really critical in terms of building foundational technology. What we have is that we use a build, test, learn process to really dive into how to construct the genetics of these strains, how to test them in lab scale and test them into bioreactor scales. We have tools to really analyze the carbon flux of these type of development work. So we have very clear understanding about how efficient these carbons can be converted into the finished product. Therefore, we have very clear knowledge around the techno-economics of these process and what are the cost bases to make these materials, which I think is critical in order to make novel technology and novel ingredients to compete in a space where it's very efficient, it's very low cost, and so it's very difficult competition. So that I think that's a critical component for novel technology development. And this is a sample of fats that we extracted. This was actually was developed almost about a year ago. When we extracted our fats from our fermenters, what was surprisingly pleasant for us is the fats actually melts and looks just exactly like a butter product. Chiara said, like, butter is the gold standard for fats. And for us to see the material coming out of the fermenters behaving very much like a butter product was really a pleasant surprise. And in terms of use cases, we create cream-enriched fats really has no trade-offs between taste, flavor, and functionality. Here are some examples that we're targeting. And the reason we're picking the dairy products is because one is around the market adoption. We see a lot of consumer willingness to pay for these category of products. And also from what Jason just described earlier, triglycerides or fats and lipids, in particular in the form of butter fats, they are so significantly important in dairy product formulation, and it behaves very differently compared to animal meat product, which you would need these adipose type of technologies to combine. So that's where we see the opportunity in terms of our technology and the fats that we can produce to really tackle these markets. And here's application insights our food scientist has developed. I think one of the chefs mentioned about creaminess as a really important aspect in terms of dairy applications and fats. And this is what you can see. Our scientists work with the purified lipids that we have, and essentially did a number of tests. And you can see in some cases where it created heavy cream type of properties, and in some cases where the fats maybe we had a higher ratio of hard fat to soft fat, so it's solidified. So you can kind of see it on the other side of the tube that it becomes a solid fat. So it's really interesting in terms of application development, using designer fats in terms of adjusting these fat properties into specific applications of interest. Yeah, here are again some examples of our profiles. As a company, we really managed to develop the technology to tune the profiles of saturates versus unsaturates. So we can, and the percentages of these fats, so we can make a range of melting point and melting behaviors because of these ratios and profile differences to make application-specific fats. For us, we want to become the go-to partner for precision fermentation fats by 2030. And we focus really strategically through meaningful partnerships and manufacturing capacities. So we look at it in three categories, from feedstocks. Diversification of feedstocks are important, and ideally the renewable carbon, if you can divert from land-based agriculture, is really, really critical. I think that's what Savor's technology using CO2 is another example of moving away from traditional carbon sources. And for us, fermentation and manufacturing to have meaningful partnerships so that as a technology innovator, as a young company of 2 years old, but be able to meet the demand of the market and get the production up, we're working with these strategic partners to make fermentation and manufacturing. Yeah, and these are examples of a number of these markets we're working on. Of course, fats and milk and dairy fats, they're hugely important, not just in the dairy space, but as well as nutrition. So we're also looking at spaces beyond plant-based dairy to see how our fats can improve human nutrition. So these are the partnership models that we have. We work with co-development partners, wants better nutrition and a healthier planet overall. And this is our team. We're a local company. We're based out in South San Francisco. Yeah, very proud of what the team has done in terms of building the core tech, and really we're getting a lot of demonstration of what we're capable to produce. So, thank you.
I love how tunable fermentation is as a platform for these fats and being able to make different types. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Yulin. All right, we have one last talk and then we will be moving to a panel Q&A. So a reminder to everybody to please feel free to put your Q&A in the app. We'll also pass around the mic to the audience if you guys have questions. I already have some really good questions coming in on the app, so I'm really excited about that. So our last speaker today is Shigeki Sugii, and Shigeki leads the Laboratory of Fat Metabolism and Stem Cells at Institute of Molecular and Cell Biology at A-Star in Singapore. He also holds a joint appointment at Duke Medical School, and he graduated with a BS in agricultural chemistry and received his Ph.D. in biochemistry. So very, very great background for exactly this. He then conducted a postdoctoral research position at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies and Howard Hughes Medical Institute in the US. And he recently founded ImpacFat in Singapore. And everybody else on the panel, including myself, I think drove here today because we all live in the Bay Area. So let's give a special round of applause to Shigeki for taking a 16-hour flight from Singapore today to join the rest of us.
Yeah, thank you, Priera, for a nice introduction. And yeah, I'll be happy to fly over here for 16 hours. Despite the jet lag, I was quite excited to participate in this great conference. So I'm actually a scientist by professions based in A-Star in Singapore, one of the government institutes. But as part of the research activities, I co-founded and spun off ImpacFat. So large part of my talk will focus on the scientific part because I'm a researcher by nature. But the last part of my talk will be a part of the ImpacFat activities. So now that all of you know the importance of fat, yeah, of course, also people know that many of the plant-based meat products, are missing the good fat portions. And the importance of fat is exemplified by the marbling of the beef. And in the case of fish, it is a fatty tuna. It's probably the best example where we call the toro. So like the otoro has having the highest fat content, with the akami has the lowest fat content. But as you know that as otoro, the fat content increases, the also price increases. So the fat is correlated with the premium of the food products. And this is actually proven by a various study. And this review paper has compiled all the consumer preference studies. And fat content in the x-axis is correlated with various the consumer perceptions of the tenderness, juiciness, flavor, and overall liking. And as you know that many traditional fat includes the plant-based oil or animal fat like meat, sashimi, dairy products, fish oil, and so on. But as you have seen that there are more options of the fat mimetics, and you have seen that various way of processing oil to make animal fat-like structures, or you can ferment lipids. What we pretty much focus on is culturing the cell to make the fat cells. And I will talk about that in a later slides, why we do that. So when you talk about the fat, you actually refer to the different things. You may actually refer to the fat cells, or you may refer to the fat molecule we call the lipids. And when you talk about fat for food. And just wanted to highlight because that when you talk about the fat cell, this is actually the fat you eat in animal meats or fish fillet and so on. And animal fat cells are typically complex in cell structure, like it contains various organelle, membranes, and extracellular matrix. So the composition is quite complex. And the lipid contents are also complex, but they are stably stored in a structure called lipid droplets in a large structure enclosed by membranes. And this ensures stability of the lipids, so it prevents oxidations and so on. And when you eat, it also may contain the bioactive proteins and other nutrients. So not just the fat, but it also has different kinds of nutrients in it. When you eat, you actually have profound effects. And when you put in the mouth, it gives you the juiciness. While in regular temperature, it's relatively stable. So it's resistant to the temperature changes. And production-wise, the cultivated fat is theoretically unlimited as long as you have a very good cell lines and sustainable culture media. And when it comes to the use of alternative meat, this is still the emerging technology, so more studies are definitely needed. So that's why we have active academic research. But when we have a successful cultivated fat, it does not need heavy processing. So this is a scheme of the cultivated we call the cellular agriculture to make a cultivated fat. So, and before we begin this study, we did comprehensive studies of all the adipocyte-related protocols. And those papers which use the cells from the agricultural species, including bovine, porcine, chicken, other livestock, or seafood. And we investigated different aspects of the protocol, including what kind of tissue sources or what kind of isolation method to isolate the cells. And then we investigated what kind of cell types they use, or growth media or differentiation condition to make fat cells, and what kind of the genes or protein they investigated to make sure they are indeed adipocytes and fat cells, and the analysis method, to make sure they are fat cells. I don't have enough time to talk about it in detail, but if you're interested, we already published 2 papers, so please feel free to get the paper and read. And afterwards, we are kind of interested in the fat from fish cells and why fish, because we believe that fish fat has a better consumer perception than livestock fat, and also the health benefit wise, it has a less saturated fat. It has a high amount of more healthy fats such as omega-3 fatty acids like DHA and PA. And we believe that fish fat may offer the better taste, texture, aroma than simply using oil and lipids. And again, showing the scheme that we use. So we isolate the cells from the edible fish species. We establish the cell lines from different species. We establish a condition for growth and differentiation into mature fat cells. And afterwards, we expect that we combine with other parts like muscle cells or edible scaffold so that we can make a cultivated meat or cultivated fillet. And this work has been supported by the Singapore Food Story R&D program. So just quickly showing some of our scientific results. We isolated different cell lines from different species of fish. The first cell line we established was from, we call the parting locally, which is popular in Southeast Asia. It's a part of the catfish, also called the Pangasian. Other species we also isolate cell lines from include sea bass, unagi, or also called Japanese eel, Australian jade perch. And in the case of Pangasius, catfish-derived cell lines, typically we screen through the thousands of the single cell or near single cell clones. And when we look at the different growth characteristics, we found that there is a variety of the cell growth rates, but we typically pick up one of the highest growth rate cell clone. And when we measure the metabolism, we found that these high growth rate cell lines consume a lot more glucose or glutamine or amino acids and other metabolites. And we also found that they can grow relatively well as fast as 13-hour doubling time. And another surprise was we could get spontaneously immortalized cell lines in many cases. So that the best cell line we have so far, they continue to grow. Right now, we actually got more than 320 passages that translate to the more than 440 population doubling. Next, we needed to establish the condition to differentiate into mature fat cells. And there has been an established protocol for human and mammalian cells, but the same protocol does not work for our fish cells. But we managed to optimize and find the conditions that works well for our fish cells. And this shows, so the blue is a nuclear staining and the green is a lipid staining. And we found that they can differentiate well into mature fat cells as fast as 6 days. And as you see that when we calculated the percentage of the differentiation efficiency, it's almost close to 100%. And day 6, it reaches maximums. And now, more recently, we also managed to optimize further, and we actually achieved that as fast as 3 days of differentiation. The similar protocol also works for other fish species, such as Australian jade perch or Japanese eel. And we were wondering, and I think regulatory bodies may be wondering if our cells, it grows so well, but is it kind of the cancer cell? So there may be concern. And we also have the question. So that's why we did the whole genome transcriptome analysis by using the RNA-seq technique. So here we compare our fat cells with the original fat tissues from the catfish. And we found that the gene expressions has 88% of the gene expression changes are similar. And the rest of the differences, we believe that it's due to the presence of other cell types in original fat tissues, because fat tissues not only contains the fat cells, but also contains the immune cells, blood vessel cells, and so on. And is represented by the number of the immune response genes or extracellular region genes and so on when we did the gene ontology analysis. But more importantly, when we look at any tumor-associated genes, we did not see any major changes associated with cancer. And when we did a nutrition analysis, this is still a preliminary result, but we found that still high in protein, but they of course contain number of the lipids. And we found that the majority of the fat species are unsaturated fat kind, which is more healthy kind. And as for the omega-3 fatty acid, we also found that after stimulation into mature fat cells, we see the increase in DHA and EPA. And when we did more detailed analysis of fatty acid composition, this is in collaboration with the Shigeki, the Food Institute, another food institute in ESTA, Singapore. We compare our the catfish cells together with the tuna, the fatty tuna, or lean tuna, or catfish fat. And we found that our profile is kind of in between the tuna and the original fat in terms of the compositions. But importantly, we found a significant number of the DHA and EPA similar to the tuna. Other species, major species include the linoleic acid and oleic acid. And finally, when we need to scale up, and so far we have cultured the cells in a 2D condition, but we need to scale up. To scale up, we need a 3D culture conditions. To do so, we still need a scaffold like microcarriers because our cells are adhesive kind. And for that, we use microcarriers to grow our cells on the microcarriers and using suspension culture like this. And we also use the same conditions, the cells, and differentiate into mature fat cells on the microcarriers successfully. So right now, yeah, we patented and then working on a manuscript. Yeah, so this is just a summary which I talk about. And there are various ongoing R&D activities. And definitely to scale up, we need more capital. And as for that, we spun off the ImpacFat. And as ImpacFat activities, we are mainly working to scale up the productions into the first at the pilot scale, and then eventually, more larger scale so that we can make a commercial fat. And definitely, we also need to optimize other organoleptic properties so that it needs to taste better and feel better, have better aroma, and so on. So as part of the ImpacFat last December, we were able to have the tasting event. And to do the tasting session publicly, we still need the regulatory approval. In Singapore, we need approval from Singapore Food Agency. And with the approval, we were able to do the tasting sessions. So for that, we used the plant-based, the fish, the ingredients, and put our fish fat like this. So we put about 10% of the fat into our fish. And then we fry. And then, we had the participant to taste our fish fry with the fat. And this is our team in ImpacFat who contributed to this tasting session. And finally, this is our members who did our research work and in collaboration with various collaborators and funding support. With that, thank you for your attention.
Amazing. Thank you so much to our presenters. Of course. So right now we'll have about 20 minutes of Q&A. I have a few questions to get us started, but there are so many good audience questions as well. So I'll definitely get to those. If you all noticed Yeah, okay. All right, so if you guys all noticed, the title of this is Commercial Innovation for Alternative Fat Ingredients. And I mentioned earlier today that about 6% of the meat market in 2030 would require 0.61 million metric tons of coconut oil in order to meet that demand. So I do have to ask you guys, can you talk about the production costs and scalability of your technology? And what major cost bottlenecks do you see the alternative fat industry facing? And do you see a future where you can make metric tons of your product?
Yeah. So I feel from us, like our process is very different from everything else because it ran kind of like on a different realm. I should say our CTO, Kathleen, who was the one who worked on the research beforehand, before this was becoming a company, like often says how this was basically the only one approach that stood up instead of like being able to get up to scale with no green premium, get to play in a league where actually we can compete with palm oil and these kind of commodities that are like $0.9 a kilogram or so on. So I feel like long term we feel very comfortable and confident about our approach. It will be like a journey, like our commercial scale. We look at like being competitive with dairy fat, which is $5 a kilogram, and then world scale is more like where we think like we can get to like that $1 a kilogram. In terms of like quantity, like world scale, we're talking about like 500 KTA, so like 500,000 tons a year. So like quantities there. If I'm thinking of a bottleneck, I'm more thinking of like we need demand for all of it. We need like to scale up and like to have offtake for all of it, but the technology had proven at scale to actually get there in terms of quantities and pricing when it comes to thermochemistry.
Yeah, super. So we're focused on using commoditized raw materials and combining them in a unique way. And so from access to raw materials, the scale is ready. Our process takes, we're moving in dialogue with protein processors today to deploy some standard equipment and a different arrangement to create the structurant that we use, the protein. So that's a matter of getting that equipment deployed at the right place. And when we do so, we're using a plant protein to displace some of the fat. So we think there will be 5-10% premium ultimately over the cost of the fat itself, but by allowing both improved performance, you have an ability to reduce fat content. So there's a lot of levers that we can offer in addition to just adding additional protein to the product that can greatly offset even that very small increment over the cost of coconut today.
Yep. So we use fermentation-based technology to make fat ingredient. I have two points that I'd like to make. One is around efficiency of producing these ingredients. So systems like palm and coconut, they're highly efficient natural producers. That's why they're so massively been produced and very, very useful. They're fundamental for the society, but they lead to land use issues, and then they're susceptible to future climate changes. But it would be very hard for fermentation-based technology to compete with that level of efficiency. But if you consider the efficiency of dairy, of milk fat production, these are actually highly inefficient systems in nature. That's where fermentation technology, what we're working on, have a clear advantage in terms of that carbon efficiency, that making complex nutritious fat that can be used in dairy and nutrition applications. So, but the pain point is clear for fermentation-based ingredient is that you have to get to the next scale. what we've done so far is that we've demonstrated in the lab scale, and we're filling the pinpoint around where to get the piloting, where to find, the next scale up partners, again, in order to compete within the food ingredient space, you have to make larger amount of materials. So I think to have a clear strategy around how to scale it with companies who are strong with fermentation, with food ingredients, I think that's a way to solve that problem.
So for cultivated fat, and any of the company in a cultivated meat field is, of course, scale up is one of the biggest challenge. But I think that technologies are developing so fast that we think we are able to scale up in the next couple of years. But at this moment, we need to improve the technologies in different ways, and we need a better scaffold, for example, and we can also make the bioreactor system more efficient so that we can increase the yield. But having said that, we also need to reduce the cost. But having said that, we think the cultivated fat, ultimately offer the better options, and we have a way to make the fat in a very healthy way. So we think they can be competitive.
Yeah, I really love that. I know in my introduction, I harped more on coconut oil and adipose tissue, but I think one of the shining stars of animal fats and oils is omega-3 fatty acids. So I love that you guys are focused on that as well. Okay, we're gonna get down to the fundamentals here. I have an audience question here. This will mostly be for Chiara, Yulin, and Jason. How is the product different than traditional margarine? And then a follow-up question that was put here is, how do we avoid the trans fat debacle? So I think if any of you guys feel comfortable talking more about that fundamental.
Yeah, I'm not the most scientific and technical person on this panel, but still I can say that margarine is definitely like something that comes up. Like, this is the only thing that people can think about of like, this is butter, but it's not butter. This is butter, but doesn't come from animals. And it's very cheap. And it gets back to like what we were saying here, which I believe it's a core focus. Like, your first question is what everybody should think about days and nights. With Green Premium, we don't sell anything. And the result is people buy margarine just because it's cheap. And it does kind of like the work. Does it do it greatly? It does not. But still, like, people are like, it's cheap and this is what I can afford. But still, this is different. It doesn't have any trans fat when it comes to like our product specifically. If we talk to massive producers, they don't use margarines mainly for a performance reason. Like, we see like how, yes, Green Premium is something we should avoid, but at the same time, they don't need to go so down in price to have margarine. If the gap in terms of performance is so big, nobody can laminate pastry with margarine. Nobody can have like a puff pastry that is decent with margarine. And so I feel like the main difference for us on that is how can we get to a price point which is not higher, it's just price parity, but the performance actually gets there. And margarine didn't do that job.
Again, for us, since we're using oils that have been consumed for decades, we're not changing anything about those oils, as well as the proteins. So we don't, from our perspective, there's the risk of displacing some well tolerated oil with something new, and yes, with this.
So for us, when we talk to experts in food industry who are familiar with fats and lipids, who really understand the issues with margarine and trans fat, they understand clearly what precision fermentation can offer. Again, you're using the same biosynthetic pathway that you would see in plants or in animal systems, but using it in a microbial system. So the products that you're making are not through like a chemical modification process, which is what the province that margarine and trans fat had. So that's a clear value proposition using precision fermentation to make fats and lipids.
Those are excellent. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, margarine is mostly made of hydrogenated vegetable oils. So what that means is a lot of plant fats, they're kind of short chains and they're a little bit kinked. So they look like kind of like that when they stack up on each other. Once you make unsaturated fat into a saturated fat, it kind of takes those kinks out and straightens them. And then you have it so that they pack really well. And this is why those animal fats are solid, because those fats can pack very, very well. They're straight. Whereas the plant oils that are a little bit kinked like this, they can't really stack on each other. So they end up forming an oil because they're not interacting with each other in such a way. The issue with that is once you start straightening them out, you're making a saturated fat. So if we're trying to move away from, if we're trying to add any nutritional advantage to these, getting away from those saturated fats is awesome. However, I mean, saturated fats are also great and tasty, so there's room for them in the market as well. But that's essentially what ends up happening on the molecular level here. And I think to Jason's point, there's a few things that we can do to actually make these fats. You can either construct them, take oils, don't even modify them at all, and then construct them into a building block that looks like a solid fat without actually having to modify those kink chains. So that's exactly what Jason is working on, is you just take the oils as is and you encapsulate them up, and then you get the nutritional advantages of having unsaturated oils instead of a bunch of saturated oils. And that hydrogenation stuff, when you straighten it out, sometimes the molecules get confused and form trans fats. And that's the reason why that's those are kind of connected. But all of the strategies here allow for circumventing that. And then I'm sure also when you guys are doing any type of molecular modifications that you're also checking for those trans fats as well. Fantastic. Okay, so I think I already asked that part. Let's see. I will ask Shigeki a question. I really like this one. So if you were to put a fish fat into a plant-based beef or something like that, would it actually taste like fish?
Yeah, that's a very good question and interesting. And we also consider a lot. And it turns out, and our fish fat under regular conditions then does not have any fishiness, and taste is quite neutral so far. And we believe that we can optimize the taste, but that actually opened up a possibility of the complementing, not only the plant-based seafood, but also the plant-based, beef, pork, chicken, etc. So I think, yeah, we are also working on to complement which one, serves the best.
I love that. I love the idea of sneaking omega-3s into other fats. It doesn't have to just be fish fat. We can have omega-3s everywhere. Okay, fantastic. I love that. So, okay, can any of the panelists speak to aftertaste? So I'm going to try Savor's butter after this, so I'll let you guys know about the aftertaste. But can any of you guys speak to aftertaste? So you did touch upon points like mouthfeel, taste, melting points. But what about that aftertaste? That's one of the shortcomings of some existing non-dairy alternatives or non-animal.
That's a great question. I feel talking to chefs, it kind of like it very much comes up. Let me start by saying that what we have been learning is that when you talk to alternative ways to make fats, texture is a mouthfeel is the first thing that comes up, which is why we have been focusing on that. If you talk to chefs are like, we can play with flavor all day long. We can't play with how it feels into your mouth and mouthfeel and melting profile, which is why we are leading with that. Having said that, we know that fat is flavor. So far, we have done basically nothing on flavor because we really want like a very neutral platform and then to work off of that. But there are some chains of fatty acids that do have some specific flavors, like just naturally, like they can. For example, like C4 is well known for having like a creamy flavor and so on. So this is what we have been leveraging so far. nothing more. So feel pretty good about like where we are on flavor in terms of neutrality. If you have a lard, you'll definitely feel the pork, and this is something that will come after, at least for us. But we learned that is when it comes to fat is mainly texture, and flavor comes as a workable thing that otherwise you would not have to do. Like if you don't have texture, we don't even talk about it.
Yeah, for us, the oils themselves are what they are, but of course, plant protein isolates are not known to be neutral in flavor, and so there's some, in our early iterations, there's some off notes or greeny notes that you might get from that, which we've largely been able to mitigate. It's more, again, we're at a very small level of the protein content, and in the naked form where it's simply oil and protein, you might get a little bit of the residual plant protein flavor, but with any formulation work and putting them into any finished product that we see, it's really absent.
For our product, the fats is neutral, so it's a purified form of fat, so the taste is really neutral. When we did the application development work with some of these dairy applications, we've noticed the challenges actually from the plant-based protein that may be used in these kind of formulation development, and then these earthy greeny notes from the protein sources is actually present a challenge for product formulation. So that's our insights.
All right. I'm excited to try all of you guys' fat products, especially the cultivated fat product. I think now that it's regulated in the US, maybe we could do a tasting over here too. Okay, great. So this one, Shigeki, I think this is more geared towards you, but apologies if it doesn't make sense. We'll see. So will fatty acid synthesis proteins, which have been patented by other companies, have any potential impact on your process? And what are some ways around this, if so?
To my knowledge, it doesn't affect us because we do not manipulate any genetics, related to fatty acid synthesis. And right now we don't use any gene modifications to enhance the fatty acid synthesis, including omega-3 fatty acids. So, but we are, of course, interested in understanding the biosynthetic pathway in a more natural way, rather than gene editing, things like that.
Awesome.
I'd say actually that's related to our core tech development. Fatty acid biosynthesis, as I mentioned, has been studied. There's quite a bit of work, for example, around omega-3 fatty acid from microbial sources. So in general, from tech development standpoint, we do freedom to operate type of analysis to see what's the patent landscape, what are the genes or enzymes that's been patented, and so that then we kind of devise our strategy around how to design our pathway and the type of enzymes we use for the synthesis of the target fatty acids.
Thanks.
So, yeah.
Awesome. For those working with butterfat, what is the butyric acid content of your butterfat? You know it off the top of your head?
I don't. I don't know.
No.
We don't. So again, focusing on the melting properties of what milk fat or butter fat is like. So we don't have any butyric acid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yulin, again, I don't know if you can speak to the organism that you're using, maybe a little bit more broadly. But I think the second part of this question is really great for the downstream processing side of things. Do you harvest from the cell mass or from the media?
Yeah, we harvest from the cell mass.
Okay.
So again, it's because fatty acid synthesis is actually highly conserved. So like, animals or plant seed oil or microbes, they're intracellular, so the lipids are produced intracellularly. And we work with a grass organism, again, considering in general to, to apply in food ingredient space in terms of the type of organisms. So we work with grass organism to do the development work. So.
Are there any audience questions? Oh, okay, I saw a hand go up right away. Let's see this. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great, thank you very much. Eric Peterson, INRS, Quebec, Canada. I'm actually a collaborator on a GFI project that's looking into fermenting animal lipids from waste lipids. And so the feedstock is a really important consideration when you're looking at sustainability. And I was wondering if any of you have done life cycle analysis or could speak to the carbon footprint of your respective products.
Yulin and I were talking about feedstocks yesterday a little bit.
Yeah, I think feedstock is critical. That's why I even have feedstock on my slide around kind of partnerships we're looking for. Because I think there's short-term and long-term climate impacts for feedstock of choice. And then how efficiently we can decouple from the land-based type of feedstock. Ideally, if you can upgrade, like you said, like if there are large-scale waste streams that you can upgrade into a finished product that can be used in the food system, that there will be a lot of value there. For us, we haven't done a lot of LCA analysis. Again, the stage of the company is primarily technology development. So we've done more around techno-economic side of analysis. And but we're definitely very mindful about any scale production of fermentation systems. You have to do thorough LCA analysis to see how feedstock and energy cost and including like downstream type of separation cost may affect the overall life cycle analysis for the metrics. So.
Yeah, we'll be taking the stream from a crush facility, probably applying incrementally small additional energy into that stream and combining it with liquid oil. So, it will be a modest increase in CO2 impact over plant-based protein isolates and oils. So.
We don't have a full LCA done on this process. There have been LCAs done on using the same technology in the past. We say we're carbon neutral to be extremely conservative because we start from CO2. We actually start minus, and then we build our way up there. So we believe that if we use renewable energy, we'll be able to be neutral. But could we claim we're going to be carbon negative? We could, but we are not claiming that because we don't have that full LCA done yet. And some of the reasons are very similar to what they're saying. Like the stage of the company, there is still like the R&D cycle is so fast that if you do an LCA today, in 6 months from now, you probably have to do it again. And so we have to wait on that.
Even for cultivated fat, we also try to use the culture media components that are derived from valorized, waste material like plant extracts and algae extracts and so on. But I think more research is needed. But definitely we intend to replace or some serum components with those materials.
And Eric, we are publishing an analysis next month on side streams and byproducts, and it's looking at the top 8 agricultural crops in Canada, US, and Mexico. So corn, canola, soy, wheat, barley, rice, and tomatoes. And we looked at all of their major byproducts, those volumes, and we ranked them according to how good of an alternative protein input they would be. So that included plant protein concentrates for more of the protein-rich type byproducts, but we also looked at lignocellulosic sources for as sugar sources for feedstock. So keep an eye out for that one. I think you'll be very interested in that. We're going to take one more last question and then wrap up the session. If you need to go, please feel free to go.
Hi, I'm Celine with Mista. I have a question for you. 10, 15 years ago, there were some new biotech ways of making oils that didn't really take off commercially. So can you speak to what is the sentiment for the food giant? I'm talking about CPG companies and union players. Are they motivated now to change their ways?
If I'm understanding correctly, 15 years ago, there was a wave, but it didn't take off in terms of, yeah. And so you're asking what's different now? For our specific case, we think what's different is that we can't get to like no green premium as like and we know it's harder for other technologies, but we think we can. And we can get to like those massive volumes that those companies are looking for. Now, there is a reason why I'm working at a startup and I'm not working at a big company. It's like, we know that we have to de-risk the technology and package it to them. They will not be the one breaking through. They'll somehow like the status quo. And so there is definitely some work to do. I'm not saying this is easy, but I'm saying that like, I think technology advanced on that in terms of like price points and so on. And the pressure from consumers as well. Like the pressure that those companies had 20 years ago is not comparable to what they have now.
Yeah, I think the consumer offer and the promise of what we need to deliver on today has significant technology gaps. And so if we can get there on price and deliver the performance, I think that's the game changer. 10 or 15 years ago, it was commoditized and well-known, and the innovation demands were different. We have a tech gap now that we need to solve. And if we can do that at price parity, then I think it's a very different equation.
Yeah, I think in general, I think when we think about food and ag space, because the system is built over a very long time of practice and innovation. So in general, it's hard to compete when you are a disruption or innovating in the space. So I think be strategic around how to de-risk market risks and as well as technology risks, really navigate through this ecosystem will kind of enable companies to be more successful in the long run. So that's kind of how I think about it. But of course, I think, we're in Silicon Valley. It's built upon an innovation economy. By definition, innovation economy is high risk, high reward type of business. So there's going to be a lot of failures among a few successes.
So you talk about the food giants. I think, yeah, to our surprise, there are quite a number of the interest from the large corporations or the food manufacturers in this field. But it's not something that they jump in and make cultivated meat or cultivated fat from the start. But I think, yeah, they are the good potential partners. They already have a good sales channels, of course, production lines. What they need is a good ingredients for their products. So we are happy to work on that path.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. Can everyone please give a round of applause for our speakers one more time? Awesome. I hope I convinced you guys that there is a big toolbox of alternative fats out there. So we have a lot of things that we can be working on and making these products way better.